So for my meetup, I was able to attend a class at the Hacker Dojo in Santa Clara. It was actually the first course in a long series of courses. The first class was free, but the rest of them were paid. But that was okay. I was really just interested in getting an introduction to Python, which is what this was. It was a free Python hands-on workshop, as the title says. And he had us prior to the actual meeting. We made sure that we had an IDE downloaded. It was basically, it's what it sounds like. It was a free Python workshop. So as I said, it was called Free Python Hands-On Workshop. It was at a location called the Coding Dojo. And to give a little bit more info on the location, so it's kind of a small nondescript building. When you enter it from the side, you enter into what looks like an actual pretty cool workspace. You have maybe 3 long tables with power outlets. It seems like that's a space where you can sort of pay to have a subscription to have access to amenities and services there. So it's basically just like a place for people to come and code and chill out. There's like nice office chairs. It was actually pretty sweet. Unfortunately, our class wasn't in that main room, but it was in a conference room off to the side where they do actual like classes and events and things like that. And this was October 13th. So the presenter, his name was Himanshu Sharma. So he initially introduced himself very briefly. He didn't even mention where he worked. What he said was that he had 8 years in software development, that he had a BS and an MS in computer science, and that he worked in web services, system security, and the release pipeline. And the presenter essentially worked to teach us some of the introductions to Python. The IDE was pretty basic. It's called Thani. It was the first time I'd seen it, and it was very simple. It seems more of a good learning tool than anything, than an actual, real work programming environment. And, we learned all he sort of taught us assuming that most of us knew some basics of coding already. It was very intuitive, I thought. He taught us basic syntax, indentation, right, in Python. How data types work in Python, how the system kind of recognizes data types for you. He showed us how to use help features, so if you're not sure about how a function or like a built-in function or command works, you can search for help on what kind of parameters it takes and all that kind of thing. How to do functions. He kind of introduced himself only very briefly, so in the intermission I went up and asked him a little bit more about what it was that he did. So he mentioned that he worked for Symantec, which, I heard of before. It's this software security company, right? It says they develop system security in Java, employing testing and implementing tools in Python, and deploying their products in a language similar to Ruby. This was absolutely useful. I'd never worked with Python before, so being able to actually learn a lot of those basics made it a lot less frightening, So for the local meetup that I chose to do, something on campus, so for the purpose of this, and also because I thought I was possibly interested, I joined IEEE, the IEEE chapter at East Bay, and I did sign up with IEEE, so I am an official member. And I've been going to the meetings regularly, but I figured for the purpose of this slide that I would highlight the hackathon that was hosted by IEEE here on campus. So it was a 24-hour hackathon. I believe it was 5 p.m. to 5 p.m. It was over, I think it was a Saturday. There were a good dozen or so teams at East Bay specifically. And essentially the way that it worked was initially a couple of problems were released, and then after about an hour, a few more problems would be released. The problems they ranged in difficulty. They definitely got harder as the evening went on. And maybe part of that is also because we got sleepier. We were up 24 hours. I think I took like a half-hour nap. But it was really cool overall. Food was provided for us, and at the end of the day, we actually did pretty well. We got first at the school, and also just of any East Bay schools in general. So in our IEEE region, which is basically all of the West Coast plus Idaho, I think, and maybe Montana, we got 5th place. Only counting the states that are actually on the West Coast itself, we got 4th place. And we got 15th in the U.S. And in the U.S., I think there was maybe something like 200 or 250 teams. Worldwide, there were a lot more teams than that. We ended up placing, I think there might have been like 4,000 or something like that teams. But we ended up placing in the 95th percentile, so we still placed very high worldwide, which I was really happy about. I wasn't expecting that because I'd never done anything like this, and neither had either of my group members. We were all juniors, essentially, competing against other groups that consisted of a mix of undergrad and graduate students. So we were going up against graduate students as well. It was really cool. I mean, I completely recommend it to anybody who's never done something like this and is interested. It was definitely an interesting learning experience, without a doubt. So for Stack Overflow, I've used Stack Overflow before. It's something that I've used a lot. But, I just decided to look up something that I had been curious about. So I found this problem, good hash functions for strings. So this person was trying to think of a good way to hash up their string. Their version, I didn't think, so they were thinking of summing up the Unicode values for the first 5 characters. I don't think that was a very good solution, and I think the people in the comments ended up agreeing. So, and this is exactly why, because, stop and pots would have the same hash, because a sum would just sum up all the values. That doesn't make sense to me. So I thought this version of their hash was interesting, of kind of taking the length of the string and taking this sort of for loop approach of iterating through the string and using a prime number, 31 in this case, to sum up all of the characters in the string. And to do this in a way that generates a good prime answer that is less likely to cause collisions, which again I thought was interesting. I imagine you would take this result and then do some kind of modulus at the end if you have a smaller array. But this was a good answer. And the reason I was interested in this is because I'm in one of my classes, Data Structures and Algorithms. We're working on a back-end system for a pharmacy that has a lot of various data and data objects that are being, encoded in trees and lists. And I was interested in possibly throwing some of these things into a hash table. And so to that end, I was interested in maybe using names for things as keys, as opposed to just using like integer product IDs or something like that. And so this was interesting, I thought. And GitHub, not much to say here. I had used GitHub once before. I'm not super experienced with it, but I know the general idea. It's to basically allow groups of people to collaborate in a well-documented and kind of clearly well-defined way that keeps the entire process of building a project a lot more organized. Thank you for listening to my presentation.